In our political panel, Elizabeth Pipko tonight, former spokeswoman for the Republican National Committee, and A. Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor and former chair of the D.C. Democratic Party. Welcome both. Scott, I want to start with you. We see Governor Pritzker saying there is no emergency in Chicago that would make the National Guard necessary at this time. And we are seeing the takeover of D.C. play out. Of course, this region you're very familiar with. Crime is down, at least for the time being. Could a federal deployment to Chicago actually help this city?
Well, the president has to be invited to bring the National Guard to Chicago. Crime is not, may not be a crime emergency, but people don't feel safe. And you just saw the statistics that showed that there was a large amount of violent crime in Chicago, but Chicago's not even in the top 10 of the most violent cities. Let's remember, D.C. is different. It's a federal enclave. The president, by most accounts, legally and factually and practically, can disperse the National Guard. He controls them in D.C. But there were just 10 violent crimes in D.C. over the weekend. As a former prosecutor, I know that police presence doesn't really work. More arrest doesn't work. What really works is community policing, public-private partnerships, and giving young people an alternative to violence and gangs versus what they're involved in right now. And so what you see is the mayor of D.C. applauding this federal partnership, if that is what it is. The chest thumping and, we're going to do a federal takeover doesn't solve crime. I'm not sure it makes people feel safe. And so you're looking at a showdown with this chest pumping by the feds in Chicago. The Chicago Police Department and the mayor doesn't have to cooperate with the ICE agents, and the ICE agents are free to be there. In regard to the National Guard, legally, the governor has to invite or have to ask for that based on an insurrection or an emergency, and you just don't have that. I'd rather see the feds, the White House, work with the governor and the mayor of Chicago in a federal partnership to really reduce crime and to walk the streets with a coordinated effort, as opposed to being forced, having a forced narrative here that really doesn't work politically or practically.
Okay, Elizabeth, I want to bring you in here. We see DHS Secretary Kristi Noem saying takeovers of other cities are not off the table, including ones run by Republicans in the future. In the meantime, we were just looking at that per capita data a moment ago, and when adjusted for population, Chicago doesn't even crack the top 10. Why go to Chicago next?
Well, look, I think it's a complicated topic, right? Because I've had the debate, for example, about illegal immigration for many years with several people, and I would dare them to look Lake and Riley's parents in the eye and say, illegal immigration is not as bad as people say that it is. The same thing goes for Chicago and any other place in the United States of America where people do not feel safe, right? If what's happening in D.C. has worked, then it obviously is working. Even Democrats admit that it's working. Why not go somewhere else where people don't feel safe and try to make the American people feel better in the place that they live? I'm glad Secretary Noem said they're going to visit other cities, they're going to visit other states, including those run by Republicans, because it should not be politicized. We should be celebrating the fact that we have a president in there who wants to get the job done and make people feel safer when their own elected officials are not doing that job. It doesn't matter if it's Republican or Democrat, city or state. The fact is, if people do not feel safe in the United States of America, something should be done. Thank God we have a president who's getting that job taken care of.
Okay, so Scott, I do want to switch to another topic with the time we have. The CDC in a disarray at the moment after HHS Secretary RFK Jr. fired the director after just weeks on the job. The new acting director does not have a medical background. Does this turmoil put a target on RFK's back? We're seeing bipartisan calls for his resignation. Is his job on the line?
Well, his job is only on the line if Donald Trump says his job is on the line. And so far, Donald Trump has said he's got a free reign. It's really disappointing and puts us at deep risk, this country, in regard to RFK Jr.'s leadership in regard to these vaccines. Of course, the level of commitment or the bar is not competence and leadership and excellence. It's, do you support the president one way or the other, vis-a-vis Trump too? And here, RFK told Congress and the Senate, rather, that he did not disbelieve in these vaccines, and yet everything he's done has shown that he doesn't believe in the vaccines, despite science that says otherwise. And when you terminate these very qualified scientists who say that the organization is not following science, reliable science and experts, it puts all of us at risk and raises the question as to whether competence is being compromised for political loyalty or for political purposes. And so it is in disarray, but the Republicans in the White House drive this negative narrative. Parents ought to feel safe about what's coming out of the CDC, the Department of Health. And right now, I don't think a lot of Americans feel safe because they don't know what to believe or not to believe.
Okay, so let's bring Elizabeth in here. How can the ship be righted in a way where public health is not going to be impacted here?
Well, first, I would like to set the record straight that the new person being brought in to lead the CDC has said on several occasions that they're in support of vaccination. So people should know that fact. Look, obviously, this person was fired in an uncomfortable situation, right? They brought them in and then they removed them, I think, less than 6 weeks later. But the fact is, RFK Jr. was brought in by Donald Trump because the people wanted it. I was on the campaign trail seeing people get as excited almost for RFK Jr. as they were for President Trump. He's probably the next most popular person that was on that campaign trail with us, right? If you don't like him being in that seat, Democrats can win the election in 28 and put somebody else to lead Health and Human Services. That's who we have right now. That's who the American people voted for, and that's how our system works.
Elizabeth Pipko, Scott
Doesn't
Bolden.
make us safe, and does it make it without consequences and craziness? And that's what we're living with right now on the health issue.
But the majority of the American
CDC.
people disagree, unfortunately.
All right. Panel,
that's
appreciate
not true.
you.
I don't think you can speak for the majority of American people.
Thank you both. I appreciate it.